All right, welcome back. Hononegah Honors, Algebra 2. We're going to continue on 9-7. We're just going to add some more challenge to what we're doing. And so you still need those identities that you had yesterday. So you may want to pull that out as a sheet. Understand that those identities are very important. And again, verify questions are probably not something we're going to do on this E-test, but it is something that we will probably do if you were in class. So make sure you understand that, and it is something you'll have to do going forward. All right. Notice on the right-hand side, it says sine squared theta. And so I need to get this down into one trig function. Now, there's a couple ways you can go from here. Usually, if it's one fraction, I don't want to separate it into two fractions. And the top looks like a Pythagorean identity. So secant squared minus 1 would be equivalent to tangent squared over secant squared. Now, that doesn't help me much, but let's turn everything into cosines and sines. So tangent squared is equivalent to sine squared over cosine squared. And secant squared is 1 over cosine squared. So again, anytime I get an opportunity to change things into sine and cosine, that usually helps matters. All right, so now I'm going to keep going here. Fractions, anytime you divide by a fraction, you have to multiply by the reciprocal. Cosine squareds cancel, leaving me with just sine squared theta, which, by chance, that is what I was trying to verify, is that this equaled sine squared theta. All right, so now this one, both sides look complicated. Like both sides look a little bit more challenging. And I'm actually going to work on the right-hand side. Okay, anytime I see a binomial, and then this one's going to be tricky out there. Okay, I'm not going to work on the left. I'm going to work on the right. Anytime I see a binomial in the bottom, like 1 minus sine x, I'm going to multiply by the conjugate. The conjugate would be 1 plus sine x. So 1 plus sine x. Sorry about that. I'm going to redo that. So 1 plus sine x to both the top and the bottom. So some of you probably wouldn't have thought of that, but anytime I see a binomial on the bottom of a fraction, I usually like to try to multiply by the conjugate. It usually helps. So here's what we got. Don't distribute on top. So just leave it there for a second. The bottom, 1 minus sine x times 1 plus sine x would be 1 minus sine x squared, or sine squared x. I foiled. This is equivalent to, using my trig identities, is a Pythagorean identity. It's cosine squared. So now the cosine of x and the cosine of x simplifies to 1 cosine x. So now I end up with 1 plus sine x over cosine x. Now I know this is going to be a bit of a trick here. Anytime you're dividing by a single binomial, you actually can divide it into two fractions. So instead of combining two, I'm actually going to separate. I'm going to do 1 divided by cosine of x and sine divided by cosine of x. And now, what is 1 over cosine x? 1 over cosine x is equivalent to secant x. Sine over cosine x is equivalent to tangent x, which is what I was trying to make this equal. Now, there's going to be somebody that may try to do this question in a different manner, and I could. I could turn around and do this entire question in a different way, and I still could get the right answer. So just understand there is more than one way to actually get this answer, but that is how I did it, and I think it's probably the simplest way. All right. I see the left-hand side is 2 different fractions and the right-hand side is 1 solid number. So I want to add 2 fractions together. For those of you that don't remember, when adding and subtracting fractions, you need a common denominator. So I need to multiply the one on the left by 1 plus sine x, the conjugate, and multiply the one on the right by 1 minus sine x, which is the conjugate. Remember, I said anytime I see a binomial on the bottom, I usually try to multiply by the conjugate. So the top, distribute the 1, and I end up getting 1 minus sine squared x. Distribute the 1, I get 1 minus sine x over 1 minus sine squared x. So I foiled the bottoms. Now, they have the exact same denominator. So 1 minus sine squared x, and then I add the numerator. These two cancel, and I end up with 2. 1 plus 1. 1 minus sine squared is cosine squared x. And 1 over cosine squared x is equivalent to secant squared x, which is what I was trying to solve. So your job in these is to basically manipulate the equations until you get to verify what you have on the other side. More verify questions. Remember, I told you anytime I see something that I can take out as a GCF, so I can take a sine out of both those just like you would when you were factoring. So now sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. And 1 times sine is sine, which is what I was trying to verify. And I know I went extremely fast on that. All right, so I took a sine out of both of those as a GCF, and then sine squared plus cosine squared is 1 using my trig identities, and then 1 times sine of theta, is sine. Homework assignment. Again, these can be extremely challenging. Please make sure that you ask questions. Again, even though I did all verify questions today, we will probably do more simplified questions once it gets to the actual test. Good luck, be safe, and I hope all of you are doing well.